I can't tell you what a privilege and a pleasure it is to be here. I'm absolutely honored to be in your presence. When I think I flew for 28 years and always in fighters, although I did my first assignment, I spent 2 years at a B-29. And I went to my squadron commander and I said, "Sir, if you don't help to get me out of these big airplanes, I'm going to resign my commission." And I managed to go to Korea because that was a way to get out of anything in the States. I went to Korea, and I believe I'm the only person in the history of the Air Force. I had never had a jet ride. I've been only in reciprocating airplane engines. And I talked my way into the 4th Fighter Interceptor Wing, flying F-86s. And I went to the Yalu River, flying a single-seat F-86 with 7 hours in the airplane. And I don't think anybody else did it. Just what I did, I just begged. I said, "Please, I want to fly the airplane so bad," and they let me do it. And that got me into fighters, and I spent the rest of my Air Force career in fighters. I think when I look back, I was so happy that when asked me to speak, because I don't want to overdo the thing, but I am so impressed by anyone who gave so much service to our country during the Great War. I was 16 or 17 when you guys were doing it. And I look back and think, 125 or 130 miles an hour at 27,000 feet, 11 people stacked on an airplane, going perfectly straight through all that flak and fighters and everything. The only difference between yours and ours, we had missiles coming also. But it's just, I'm so humbled to be in your presence, to see the service that you and your families gave to this country. It marvels me. We were just an absolutely normal nation, and all of a sudden, the guys in the airplane, the pilot, the gunner, the engineer, everybody, nobody had any experience. You just right out in the airplane, train a little bit, and go do it. The biggest war in the history of the world. I could go on for an hour talking about that. But what I would like to do for just a few minutes is tell you a little bit about my story. And it's not my story. There were 591 of us who came back from Hanoi after the Vietnam War. I was a squadron commander, lieutenant colonel, 38 years old, flying the F-105, which was the principal dive bomber of the whole Vietnam War. They got me on my 67th mission. The F-105, the day I was shot down, was carrying 2 3,000-pound bombs. That's a little bit more than the bomb load you used to carry in a single-engine airplane. I'm in there by myself. I had, that day, the largest raid of the war to that time. I had 48 F-105s. I had 24 F-4 Phantoms flying top cover to protect us because we were loaded down with bombs. And I had 12 anti-missile airplanes. And we were bombing the Kirk Memorial Bridge in downtown Hanoi. And at 7:30 in the morning, and as the leader of the mission, I called the roll-in, and all 48 airplanes head down to bomb that bridge. Now, we roll in, I call a roll-in, everybody's going down together, and about a third of the way down at 515 knots, and about 6,000 feet, I pickle off my bombs, and just as I started my pull out of the bomb run, boom, there's a tremendous explosion in the back of the airplane. I look up, and every light on the instrument panel was on, telling me I was on fire. And at that time, when you come off the target, we used to do a lot of this to try to mess up the gunners. And I pulled away. I didn't do any of that. I got that airplane going 600 knots, and I was trying to get to a jungle just 60 miles away. And I'm climbing out because I was hit about 6,000 feet, and I had to go on down about 4,000. Then I headed out to the jungle, and I'm going 600 knots, and I'm saying, "Oh God, I hope I can make it." And all of a sudden, the stick would move like this, and the airplane didn't move. And I knew that it was burning through, and I was going to have to jump out. And I'm sure you all know that in a jet fighter, you're sitting on an ejection seat. It's like a 37mm cannon shell under your fanny. And the flight controls burned through, and my airplane had a characteristic that the tail went down, which meant we call it tucked. The airplane went just like this and straight for the ground. And so I had very little time to think. I just raised the handles for the ejection seat, squeezed the triggers, and blew me out of the airplane. And going that fast, the canopy comes off, you're blown out, and then the seat is separated, the parachute is made. I was knocked unconscious. I don't know any of this. I just know it happened. And I'm floating down in the parachute, and I came to, and I was blind. And if you can imagine the shock and the trauma from being a squadron commander, leading my squadron and my wing in the best thing I've ever trained to do all my life. Now, I'm lower than whale dung, and that's in the bottom of the ocean because my world was taken away from me. But God was with me, and I lapsed into unconsciousness again, and I landed unconscious. And when I came to, there were a bunch of Vietnamese men, women, and children clustered about me, and they were beating me and kicking at me and throwing rocks on me and beating me with, and they would have killed me, I think, if I'd have been there 5 more minutes. But what happened, even though in my stupor I could hear some gunshots being fired, they backed away and the army came up and took me prisoner. That began the 5.5-year experience. They blindfolded me, they bound me, they gagged me, and put me on the back of a truck and bumped me over the 27 miles, as it turned out, from downtown Hanoi. And they put me in a room, a small room, lying on a stretcher, and I guess it was all day because when they took the blindfold off, it was dark. They left me there on that stretcher for 3 days, and on the 4th morning, they carried me into a small room, and they untied me and set me on the floor. I couldn't walk for about 3 months from the bailout. And they propped my back up in a box. And I'll never forget this. There were 2 Vietnamese guys there, and the first one says, "Kirk, you're not a prisoner of war. You're a war criminal. You've committed crimes against the Vietnamese people. You'll be tried and most probably shot. Now you'll answer all of our questions. But you know the code of conduct, name, rank, serial number, and date of birth, nothing else." So I gave them that, and of course, they wanted to know what I was flying, what the targets were, what our tactics were, and I wouldn't answer anything. So pretty soon, they didn't seem to get excited or disturbed at all. They said, when I wouldn't answer anything, they said, "Kirk, you're very stupid." He says, "It would be very difficult for you here." And they got up and left me lying right there on the floor, propped up on the floor. Pretty soon, the door opened. The biggest man I ever saw in Vietnam came in. We called him Big Ugly. He was big and he was ugly, and he was a torture expert. And I think it's significant in all of our experiences that every person, to my knowledge, that was a prisoner of war in North Vietnam received the same treatment. We call it the rope trick. What they did was to take a piece of rope about the size of my little finger, and they wrap it about your arm 3 or 4 times just above your elbow, run it behind your back, wrap it on there, and pull it together till your arms touch in the back. Then they run it down to your ankles, tie your ankles, and pull them up behind you as you're lying on the floor, then run a rope around your neck. And they did that, and then they left. And they left me there on the floor like this, and I have no idea how long. It seemed like 3 years, but I have no idea how long. And sometime later, they came back. They never said a word. They completely untied me and said, "Now are you ready to answer our questions?" And I said, "No." Back into the ropes, and they went through this nonsense for 3 days and 3 nights. And on the 4th morning, and I don't know how I did this, but I'm very proud of the fact that I endured 3 days and 3 nights. On the 4th morning, they came in, and when they untied me, I could not move my arms. I lost complete circulation of my arms, and if you can imagine, I had been screaming bloody murder. I was in such pain, and I broke. Now, to this day, I have no idea what I told them or what I said, but you need to understand I failed. I could not hold out any longer. I don't feel too badly about that because I did my best. But after that, they moved me out from that little room that I was in and put me in a cell, which was my home for the next 14 months. Picture, if you will, a masonry building and a cell about 7 feet by 7 feet with two concrete bunks side by side with stocks or leg irons at the end of the bunks. And a big wooden door with a small little hole where they could open the door and look in from the outside. That was my home for the next 5 years, 5.5 years. We had nothing to write, nothing to read, nothing to do but sit there. Now, I was by myself in that cell for 28 days, had not seen another soul, and that was absolutely the worst period of my entire life. The trauma, every one of you in this room at one time has lost a child, a parent, a wife or a husband, something, and you know the trauma of losing something like this. Well, we all know God gives us the ability to get over things. But what happens in a situation like we were in, it's the first at least 15 days, why me? What did I do? Why am I here? My whole life was taken away from me, and I couldn't come to grips with it. And then all of a sudden, one morning I woke up. Boy, I was hurt because I couldn't walk for 3 months. And I'm dragging myself around, and I did like that. I said, damn it, I'm here. I can't do a thing about it. I've got to make the best of this. I've got to try to do my best, and I'll do it. And from that day, for the next 5.5 years, the prison camp was livable. We could make it. Once I had come to the acceptance that I'm here and I can't change it, the whole thing became a lot easier. Now, daily life, I could take 4 hours to tell you this, but daily life, we were never allowed out of the cells to do anything. You've seen pictures of World War II, guys were together all the time. I was never together. In 5.5 years, I had only seen 47 people when I was released. But anyway, I'm in this cell, and in there we were given 2 sets of, I call them pajamas, just like the stuff you get in the Yoda hospital. We had a spoon like you get in a Chinese restaurant, and a mosquito net, because the mosquitoes in Vietnam were big enough to carry you away. And nobody argued about sleeping under that mosquito net. Our toilet, we had like a 5-gallon paint can in the cell, and the only time we were out of the cell was to go out 5 or 10 minutes in the morning, throw a little water on your face, dump the toilet bowl back in the cell. For food, they gave us a bowl of soup in the morning and in the afternoon, and a piece of bread. The soup was essentially 6 months of the year was pumpkin soup, and 6 months of the year was cabbage soup. Now you see me now weigh exactly 170 pounds. I weighed 90 pounds about 4 months after I was in the camp and stayed at 90 pounds till I came home. You just can't make it, but we were never starving. I want to make that clear. Life in the camp was not that bad in terms of the food situation, because there was enough nourishment there to keep us going. The daily life was nothing but sit there. We were not allowed to see, to be with, or talk to anybody outside of our cell. And as I mentioned, 28 days I was alone. Then one night I was carried out, and as I'm walking down the cell block, I see a little room, and there's 3 Americans, the first 3 people I'd seen sitting there, and they walked me in and sat me down, and we, the 4 of us, were put back in a cell just like that, except it had double-deck bunks. We could get 4 in it. And we stayed there for about the next 14 months, doing nothing but what I'm saying. Nothing to read, nothing to write, nothing to do. Then, one morning, it was my turn to carry out the toilet bucket, and I had a very bad cold. I remember this, and I was really feeling bad. I lost all this weight. And as I'm walking down the hall, the guard has this big string of keys, and he's hit me over the head with his keys, and blood starts to run down the face of my front. And I was just sick enough and mad enough, I turned around and hit him. And so for that, they yanked me out, put me in leg irons for 2 weeks, and I spent the next 2 years in solitary confinement. I never saw another soul over that except my guards for 2 years. And then, moving hurriedly, because every time they gave us a banana, we thought maybe the war was going to end. And I was down in October of 67, and we had slogans. It was Golden Gate in 68, Across the Line in 69, 7-zip will be a pip, Home for Fun in 71, and there we sit, 4 years, just like that, no change. Anyway, Christmas night of 1970, they come in, open the door and said, roll up your stuff, you're moving. And they took us out of all the 2 and 3 and 4-man cells and put us in 7 big cells. There were not enough individual cells to bring in all the POWs from all the camps. There were 7 camps around, and some of you may remember that there was a big raid called the Santé Raid in October of 1970, where the American Special Forces and helicopters went into North Vietnam and actually landed inside a prison camp 30 miles outside of Hanoi to try to bring out some prisoners. Well, it turns out they had moved all of the prisoners out 2 weeks before the raid. So the raid was, you got everybody in and everybody out, but there were no prisoners. Well, we figured the Vietnamese must have thought we'd try it again, so they closed all the outlying camps and brought everybody into the big Wallow prison where I had been since the day I was shot down. And they put us in a room. There were 7 big cells, not quite as big as this room, and they put 45 of us in each cell. Well, you can imagine, that was like going home. That's the first time I'd seen anybody in 2 years. And everybody in there was coming out of a 2-man or 3-man cell. And nobody slept for 24 hours. We were just hugging each other and just so happy to see somebody. And from that period of time, literally up until the end of the war, things were pretty good, I have to tell you. There was much less, very little beatings, and much better treatment. I actually gained 50 pounds in the prison camp during the last 8 months before we came home. They started to give us a lot of bread, powdered milk, and a lot of potatoes, and some very little rice, and they fattened us up. After moving into the big cells, you know, being Christians, the first thing we did was have a church service on Sunday morning. And they came in and broke that church service up. They said, no, you can't have church. And we ignored them and went on. And what they did, they took the 2 senior officers out of our big group. We had all the senior officers in the cell I was in. Took the 2 senior officers out and put them back in a 2-man cell. The next Sunday we had church again. They took the 2 senior officers out. And about the 4th or 5th Sunday they got down to me, and I was back in a 2-man cell where I stayed until the end of the war. In addition to what we call the initial type of torture and interrogation, the Vietnamese in varied camps had varied forms of torture, but mostly the torture we were exposed to was during the early period after you shooting down, when they were trying to get military information. To my knowledge, there was never anybody put back in their ropes again after the initial torture. The other kind of torture we had was with leg irons. We had actually traveling irons, a long rod with leg irons, and it put you in those. We had, you tie you up at times and just tie your hands behind you, leave you tied up for a couple of days. All of these things, what they were trying to do was to get us to make statements, write anti-war material, or make a CD or a tape to be played to the prisoners, something anti-war. And if you would really hang tough, you could take a lot of torture, a lot of beatings and so forth, and not do it. And I'm blessed to say I didn't do that. But we were able, they kept doing that the entire war, trying to get things out of us. But after Christmas, when they moved us into big rooms, things got a lot better. And I want to move hurriedly to Christmas time of 1972. The war ended, by the way, in January of 73. On the 12th or the 14th of December of 1972, the B-52s came to Hanoi for the first time. That's when President Nixon decided that this had gone on long enough, we were going to end this war. So he blockaded the harbor at Haiphong, and they started to bomb downtown Hanoi, which they had never done. And I think had they done that in '67, I wouldn't have had to go to prison camp. But that's another issue. But anyway, boy, the B-52s and the walls in the prison camp were falling down because they're bombing right around us. And the war ended January the 23rd of 1973. And we came home in different segments on 4 different releases at different periods over 4 months. I don't want to take any more time to talk about the prison camp, except to tell you a couple of things. The biggest single thing that all of my fellows and I who were there is the idea that how your life can be taken away from you so quickly, and how you deal with trauma and change and adversity. I am absolutely nothing special. I'm just a guy that happened to love to fly airplanes. And there are things that occurred to me in the prison camp where I failed over and over and over again, but there are things that I won in the prison camp. And the lessons learned from that experience are what makes it a joy for me to tell a little bit of this story after some 300 or 400 times. And it is this. The first thing is our country. To me, freedom is something, every day is the 4th of July. Lynn Jones will tell you, I don't have a bad day. How could I ever have a bad day? But what I understand is, show me a room with a damn door handle that I can open and get out, I'm happy. Because when you are locked up and have your life taken away from you, and you don't know when it's ever going to end, you really understand what freedom means. And then you sit back and reflect on what this country means. And it's phenomenal what we have. The second thing is faith. Now, I don't mean to bring religion, because that's your business, I don't know. But let me tell you something. In a situation like that, I did a lot of praying. Your faith in God, faith in the United States. There was never a doubt, one moment of one day, you were going to bring us home. We weren't going to be left of the land. The third thing was faith in each other. We were, as I told you, I only saw 47 people, and all this time I was in solitary confinement. The only way I had to communicate was tapping through the walls to my fellows. And great strength can be drawn from your fellow man. Even though he was suffering like I'd be taken out, maybe I'd been beaten or tortured and put back in the cell, and this guy would tap through, Tom, we love you, we know we did your best, we're with you 100%. There's power in that you only see in a situation that's really bad. But it means a lot. Faith in your fellow guy and faith in yourself. When they take me out to a torture session, to a propaganda session, and they want all this information, and I don't give them anything, and they get me down on my knees, and they beat my behind bloody red. Why don't I give them something? Nobody's going to know but me. That's something, my friend, called values. That every one of you understand that we in the United States, with our training and our love of freedom and the way our philosophy of life is, we have values and we do our best even in a bad situation. That is a lesson I learned with so much power. To how strong I was able to be when I don't think I'm naturally that way. But you believe, and you believe in your fellow man. That's the lessons to be learned. In closing, it was a horrible experience, and certainly the defining period of my whole life. And getting out on a day of freedom, when they drove me out on a bus to that airfield, and there's a big American C-141 transport to have to fly us home, that was the happiest day of my whole life, obviously. And I reflect all the time on this. At 84 years old, I'm looking back every day, because every one of you sitting in this room, somebody just said a little early, just think how blessed we are. How blessed we are, first, to be Americans. Secondly, how blessed we are to live in this country. And third, how blessed we are to be able to be at something like this. I thank you for your service. God bless this wonderful country of ours, and thank you for letting me spend a few minutes with you. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Tom. And all of us are blessed that we can be a part of hearing about a personal experience that you just couldn't imagine. And Tom Kirk is someone, if you're autograph oriented, this would be the time to get a special signature on your program. And Tom's indicated a willingness to sign for a while here. So thank you again, Tom. And we're ready to go. That ends the afternoon program, and so this evening, 5 o'clock, hospitality here. Not a free bar though, it's an open bar. And 6 o'clock dinner, and a whole bunch of procedures. And then about 8:30, we have the 16-piece orchestra for your listening or dancing pleasure. And so I hope everyone can be with us this evening. So thanks again.